All right, here we go. This is Mike Banjos, Chairman of the Board of Finance. This is our regular meeting, Thursday, August 20th, 6 p.m. Hereby call the meeting of the Board of Finance to order. Please allow me to confirm members, staff, and anticipated participants. The president can hear me. I will also ask the moderator to confirm the digital identity of the aforementioned participants. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. John Ostaszewski. Here. Craig Hirsch.
I am here.
Steve Kirsch.
Here.
Jane Krashansky. No, Dane was not sure. And Rebecca McDonald.
Here.
And we have Ken Kellogg for selectman.
Here.
We have Ron Bonofsky, finance director.
Here.
Heidi Mead, deputy finance director.
Here.
Tax collector Deb Hine.
Here.
Treasurer Pat O'Connell.
Here.
Superintendent Kabasa.
Here.
I think that's everybody. All right. I hereby declare we have a quorum and call this meeting to order. A copy of the agenda and any related materials have been posted and can be found on the TEBS website, www.monroe.org, for public inspection. This public meeting is being conducted remotely in compliance with Section 1 of Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B, dated March 14, 2020, using GoToMeeting electronic conferencing technology. Using this technology, the public should participate in real time via computer, tablet, smartphone, or telephone using the access information set forth in the meeting agenda. Please be advised that the meeting has unique participation information, so please be sure you have access to the correct meeting. Notice is hereby given that only 250 participants may access this remote electronic public meeting at any one time. Access to this meeting using this technology is granted solely by the technology provider on a first access basis and is not controlled by the town of Monroe. While as anticipated, we will not exceed this participation limit for this meeting should it appear that we are approaching said limit, so that any member of the public is denied access to this meeting. I, as chairman, reserve the right to adjourn and continue the meeting at a later date using technology appropriate to ensure all members of the public may participate. Please take notice regarding this remote electronic public meeting. This meeting is being conducted in real time. This meeting is open to the public, and any of the public may listen or view this meeting anonymously. This meeting is being recorded. While we ask that you mute your microphones unless recognized to speak, that anything you say, do, or display on your screen may become part of the recording. The recording should be posted to the town's website within 7 days. The recording should be made available to the public within a reasonable time. This meeting shall follow standard parliamentary procedures. However, I ask participants to follow these special rules. In addition, please mute your microphones so as to reduce background noise anytime you're not speaking. Prior to speaking on each occasion, each speaker shall clearly state their name and title for the record. The use of the chat feature is prohibited and will not be considered during the meeting if in use. All right. We can get started. Review of the minutes, voting record for July 23rd. I want to make a motion.
Steve Kirsch, I move to accept the meeting minutes and voting record for July 23rd, 2020.
This is Craig.
Thank you, Craig. Any discussion, comments, questions? Hearing none. Steve Kirsch.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Craig.
Aye.
Rebecca.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay. First selectman, you are up.
Thanks, Mike. Ken Kellogg speaking. The primary thing I wanted to just bring up to the board tonight and just make a little more. Obviously, it's been a much busier August than we would have expected, right? The issue I want to talk about is just the storm-related costs of response and recovery. There's a lot of moving parts still, so these are by no means firm or final numbers, but I anticipate at this point that we are probably going to have somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 in costs related to the tropical storm. The bulk of that involves debris removal and processing. So basically trees and brush and a lot of that. There is certainly some overtime costs that are in there. And we also have, there were some damages done to town property. Obviously, there's also a strong likelihood of several offsets to those costs. There was a presidential disaster declaration. We're in the process of the state of Connecticut in trying to ensure that Connecticut and Fairfield County qualifies for disaster, for federal relief. So there's a possibility of FEMA reimbursement for some of those costs. And there is certainly a very strong likelihood of insurance recovery, KERMA, particularly for some of the damages that were done to town property. So more to come. I just want to make sure the board was aware of it. And then we also have the ability of some grants we could possibly tap into cover anything that's not covered otherwise, but there's some trade-offs there. But we'll know more. We probably get into this, hopefully by next month, but certainly not too long after that, we'll have a better sense of what the total costs are and where we're at relative to how to cover those costs.
Ken, this is Craig Hirsch. Quick question. I know it's on the town side. Is there any relief or any funds for our town residents that may not have any type of damage or relief that was not covered by their homeowners or their insurance?
Yeah, there is a possibility that would, if approved, if we qualify, that would be through the SBA small business loan process. That would be the most likely route that they would get. And again, you're right, it would have to be uninsured losses. We'll certainly, if that's granted to the state and Fairfield County, we would make sure that information was available to our residents.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ken, Steve Kirsch, two questions. Number one, can you talk a little bit more about the debris removal cost? Is that our labor? Is that labor from third parties we hired? What exactly is that?
A little bit of both. Most of it is and I would have to, have our public works director speak to this in more detail, but most of that is the processing of that brush when it comes to the landfill. It has to be, there's a certain, well, first of all, we have to stage it in a way that is appropriate for FEMA. There's a lot of documentation that has to be done. There's site visits, and then ultimately that pile has to be processed, meaning ground up, and there's a cost to do that. Okay, my second question is, I know that there was, you keep talking about the recovery and all the debris that had to be removed and so forth. Back in the spring of 2019, DPW had put in for a couple of pieces of capital equipment. If I remember correctly, one was a bucket truck, one was a chipper. If I remember correctly, that was put off till at least this year, and then obviously COVID jumped in. Would any of that equipment, number one, I'm assuming A, we didn't buy any of that. B, would having that equipment have helped us in clearing and any of shortening of recovery time? I would say not in any material fashion. I mean, the bucket truck is, our crews are not trained to go into dangerous areas. They're not electricians. They're not linesmen. They're not going to go into areas that have not been declared safe by Eversource. Quite frankly, when we're clearing an area, it's, typically with a payloader once they say the roadway's cleared, and they have to, clear. There certainly would be, incremental areas that we would, possibly be able to have our own crews tackle, something here, something there. But something of this magnitude, there's contractors that are being brought in from Eversource. There's, our own tree contractors are being brought in. And I think, the resources would certainly complement that, but I would not want this board to think that, like, by having one bucket truck, that would have made a, some remarkable magical difference in how long it would have taken to clear roads. I mean, quite frankly, the road clearing was by far delayed strictly because Eversource did not have make-safe crews available to us to ensure that they were safe for the crews. We had all the crews, the public people were ready to go. Our crews were ready to stand by, and we had our tree vendors in as well on top of that, and they were ready to go as well. So.
Okay, thank you. On a different subject, and Mike, tell me if we're going to talk about it someplace else. COVID, in terms of cost, I know that
we are going to jump on that down the road here. Yeah.
Then I will hold my question till later.
Perfect. Because I want to push on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Public participation. Anybody? Not hearing anybody. We still have our 3-year budget model under unfinished business, and I've done nothing to work on that, so we're going to kick that till next month. Let's jump through the new business for the motion to approve the request for the tax collector.
Steve Kirsch, I'll make a motion. I move to approve the request from the tax collector dated August 10, 2020 to remove old credit balances of $12,461.07 for the 2015 and 2016 grand list pursuant to Section 12-129 of the Connecticut General Statutes.
I second. This is Craig Hirsch.
Okay. Any discussion, questions? This is pretty standard fare. I think we do it every year. Deb, do you have anything?
Yeah, this is a thing we do every year for the to remove the credit balances. These are no longer refundable by state statute, so we request this to be taken off because they're no longer refundable.
Perfect. All right. Anybody have any further discussions? All right. Steve?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Rebecca?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. So the next thing is the review of the monthly financials, and this is where I want to get into a little bit of the COVID discussion. But I'm assuming Steve was heading the same direction. I did have a good chat with Ron today. So basically, obviously, there's a lot of COVID expenses that are going on. There's also a lot of unknowns, certainly on the school side. Going into the school year, not knowing exactly what we're going to need to do, and certainly we're going to have to respond on the fly. I had spoken to Ron, and I made a suggestion that I think it would make sense for us to pull out all the COVID expenses, both on the town side and the Board of Ed side, and create a fund where we could push all these expenses, run the fund negative. We are going to be making applications for reimbursements, and as the reimbursements come in, we could keep track of what our net exposure and outlay is. I don't think it's going to be practical or reasonable to expect the Board of Ed to work all these COVID expenses into their regular budget and then be at risk of not getting reimbursed. And then also, these are one-time expenses in a lot of cases, and I'm making the great assumption that it won't happen again next year. So what I would like to suggest, and I suggested to Ron to see what he thought about it, was to make this fund and to track all the expenses, so it's also transparent to the townspeople that we do have additional expenses that are not budgeted. We will have to address them. We don't know what the state funding is going to be. We don't know what federal funding is going to be. But at least if they're all in one place, I feel like it would be much easier and more transparent to track and won't affect our budget numbers for next year. So I know, Ron, you can probably speak to this, but I know you spoke to the auditors today, and I think they were very positive about the idea.
Yeah, they did not have an issue with that, Mike. So right now we're actually doing something similar to that on the town side. And on the Board of Ed side, we're capturing all COVID expenses within one account within the operating budget. So to pull those out and bring them over to the fund would not be too difficult. But you know, we were going to track them separate over there anyway, just for you know, to capture everything for grant reporting purposes. So this would certainly, I think, you know, pull everything into one coordinated effort for sure.
Yeah, I like the fact that having it in one coordinated effort. I also don't want to be at a point where 3 months into the year, people start panicking because we're over budget on certain areas for things that are not normal operating expenses. And I don't want us to get a, you know, not that it will have a, it just, I think it'll dilute the regular budget, and I think it will throw off the numbers going forward. And this way, at least if it's in one place, we can review it every month. We can see what we're running into. We can track reimbursements much easier. I just think it's a cleaner way to run it, and I'd certainly love to hear feedback from everybody else on the board.
Mike, this is Steve. I agree. So I have a question, I guess, for you, for Ron. Do we need a formal motion from the board to establish the fund?
Not that I'm aware of, Steve. We actually, Heidi, myself, and Ken were actually speaking to this about 10 minutes ago, or 10 minutes before the meeting started. I'm not aware of anything that requires that. I mean, could it hurt for you to do it? Probably not.
I don't think there's a formal motion. It's just because it's really an accounting process. I mean, obviously, yeah. I think if we have a consensus, I think we're good to go in direction given to the you know, finance department.
So 2 points. Number one, count me in on the consensus. I think that's a good idea. And then I have a follow-up question that I'd like to know if we know how much we've spent on both sides of both the Board of Ed and the town side, if we have any idea what that expenditure has been so far.
I could talk on the Board of Ed side, and I have some, you know, just kind of rough numbers right now that I'm looking at. But you know, we're looking at right now about $220,000, which, you know, includes our first order of PPE, which you know, is based on the estimates that we used, is supposed to be about a 3-month supply, you know, hand sanitizers, wipes, masks, all that kind of stuff. A couple of other big ticket items on there. You know, all of our classrooms, we didn't go with the super deluxe. I know, you know, there are some districts that put $3,000 cameras in every room. We put, and we tested this with the administrative group earlier this week. We put cameras in every classroom with, you know, with cables and tripods for those students who will be home on distance learning. That was about $35,000. We you know, bought one for every certified staff member. So, you know, about 300 cameras. The whole setup with the extending cable and everything else was about $35,000. We have a nurse supervisor who has to do a ton of work this year, so we had to add some. We had to add to that position to the tune of about $15,000. A lot of money in software to help support, you know, distance learning, stuff that we have not necessarily had in the past, for sure, to the tune of about $50,000. There's some other purchases here and there. Those are kind of the big drivers. 2 things, like I said, you know, we have 1 order of PPE in already, and that's supposed to be about, like I said, about a 3-month supply. We'll probably start putting together a second order quickly because it's tough to get the stuff in time. It took us several weeks to get this stuff in. This does not include probably what might end up becoming our biggest expense, and that's going to be personnel and staffing. I think Jack Ciccolini is on as well, but we are you know, working on we've had, you know, a few staff members who have resigned, which is kind of budget neutral, but we do have a number of folks looking to take leave either via the Americans with Disability Act or FMLA, and that can you know, run pretty expensive. Jack, do you want to just give a quick overview? I don't know if I hit enough of that, or if you guys want more information on that.
Joe, just The PPE, this is I think you said at the Board of Ed meeting, this is $80,000
Yes.
for 3 months. Okay. I just wanted that captured here. I know it was announced at the Board of Ed.
Oh, so this is Craig Hirsch, Board Finance. Just to confirm then, the 220,000, is that for the entire year then, for the PPE?
No. That 220,000 right now is covering PPE, video setups, headphones. One of the things we learned is that we have to have supplemental headphones because if kids are on their computers at home and kids are on the computers in the classroom, if you're in the classroom, you can't have the volume on it in your computer, or you got
Right.
15 other volumes going on. It was incredibly distracting. We have some outdoor space, so we rented some tents to get kids outside for mass breaks, for lunch at the middle school and high school, outdoor classrooms. Storage containers, we had to rent units at every school because we had to empty a lot of classrooms of some of the larger furniture to make room to be able to distance all the desks and chairs. Other like COVID supplies and silly things. Even we didn't go crazy, and our custodians have done an amazing job. If you come into the buildings, the markings are really well done. But some of those things. I was actually in Staples last night, and there was a pack of 4, those floor stickers that say stay 6 feet apart, like $50. Our custodians did a lot of that work themselves. We've also made a bunch of sneeze guards in our wood shop at it probably cost us about $7, $8 in material, where these things are going for literally close to $100 a pop. So we're trying to save money wherever we can. And then, like I said, the nurse supervisor and the software.
Right.
So the PPE was just to get us through the first, according to the calculations that were given, that's supposed to get us through the first couple of months. But like I said, the big thing that we're working through, and Jack has really been, spent the last week is talking with staff to find out, who's coming back, who is asking for leave, and then working through the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, and figuring out, some of the implications for that.
Okay. That sounds great. Thank you for Joe for breaking that down. I'm just trying to understand what the PPE cost would be for the entire year. So if it's $220,000 for 3 months, so are we looking at $660,000, $700,000 for the year then?
Again, Craig, that 220,000 is PPE is included in that. The first round of PPE was about, I'd say, about 85. It was about 82,000 for our initial purchase. Then we also bought some N95 masks, so we're about at 85,000. I mean, if we were to multiply that by 4, what are you at? 330 or? Am I doing that?
I mean, I think we got to all be honest. Also, is we don't really know
exactly.
run rates. If we're going to be in school for a full year, there's a lot of unknowns.
Totally.
So, I think we've got to go under the assumption of let's get through 3 months. Yep. Let's track every expenses, and then we're going to, on a month by month basis, try to have a better idea. Because let's be honest, I think it's a smart approach not to buy a year's worth of supplies.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Yeah. I'll totally agree with that. I'm just trying to get an idea what it might cost for the, for an entire school year.
Well, I'm assuming some of those supplies are going to be a one-time purchase, not an ongoing every 3 months.
Absolutely. The cameras, obviously.
The cameras obviously are one time, and the tenting is not going to be an ongoing, every quarter. So there's certainly a bunch of them that are going to be a one-time, non-recurring, which is also why I don't want it in the budget because, once we do it, I'm praying we're not going to be doing this, too many more times.
All right. I'm glad Glass asked because it sounded like the PPE part was just $220,000 for 3 months and then reoccurring. So I didn't realize the breakdown was included in 2020, the 220,000. Changing gears a little bit, you mentioned staff taking leave, family leave, and the cost. Just in my experience, when my employees, at my work, take family leave or like a personal leave or family leave, it is unpaid. So are you saying in this case we're paying in this situation?
Yeah, I'm going to let, there's been a lot of guidance we've been working almost daily with our attorney trying to get through this because some of it is paid, some of it is unpaid. And Jack, I'll let you kind of jump in because I know you've got a better grip on this as you've been working with it every day.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So there are, in the most basic, there are 3 ways currently due to the coronavirus that someone might access leave. There is an emergency paid sick leave act. There's a Family First Coronavirus Act. And then there's the more traditional that we're all familiar with, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, that ultimately leads to FMLA. The first 2 that I mentioned, the Emergency Paid Leave Act and the Families First, there are 6 areas outlined that can trigger an employee to be able to use the EPSLA, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, and that is the 3 of them all surround having COVID or COVID symptoms or being quarantined through a federal or state order. That could be as simple as a travel order. You've gone to some place that upon return to Connecticut, you're forced to quarantine for 14 days. Anybody falling in that category can utilize 10 days of the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and be paid up to $511, up to their full per diem, or with a cap of $511. But the act reads that should their per diem be more than that 511, they can use any accrued sick time to supplement that. The final 3 statements of the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act all are referring to care of someone, in other words, an individual or our employee caring for an individual who has COVID, or caring for a child that either has COVID or has lost daycare or schooling due to closure due to COVID. And in those 3 situations, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act provides for a cap of $200 per day to them, but still with the caveat of the first 10 days providing they can use accrued sick time. For one of the 6 items in that act then lead to a potential extension, and that is to an employee who may have a child care issue due to school closure or loss of daycare, both have to be related to COVID. They can extend that leave for 10 weeks or 50 days running consecutively, and they would be paid at 2/3 of their salary or with a cap of $200 a day. At that point, there is not the opportunity to use accrued sick leave. The last is an ADA situation. If someone's health issue has a significant life impact on life function and would be exacerbated by COVID, they can request FMLA leave if other accommodations cannot be offered, and that's the first thing we explore, accommodations to allow them to access work. But if those accommodations are not such, they can apply for FMLA leave. And because of the connection between COVID and sick leave, the recommendation that we have received through council is that with that there is an illness involved, so they can access sick days. It's not in each and every case, but the potential is there that they can access accrued sick days.
Thanks, Jack. It's incredibly complex, but
I was just going to say the bottom line is you're going to need more staff to cover the people who aren't there.
And there's a good chance we're going to be paying people
who aren't going to be there
while we're doing it. That's why, the big caveat that 220 before staffing needs. Now, like Jack has said, after talking to a lot of staff members, I think after reassuring them of a lot of the procedures we have in place, a lot of them have taken, I wouldn't say half of them, but we had a good number that initially reached out to Jack for a variety of reasons.
So Joe, when you say half, I mean, you're talking about half of what? I mean, how many people have reached out, or what's?
Initially, good question, Craig. Initially, Jack had, I think, over 40 people reach out.
That's correct. There were 40. I think the number was 43 initially. We're down to potential 12 that may have an impact through FMLA, and right now only 2 that the EPSLA Act, and those are both related to child care. One is confirmed. One I'll be processing that leave tomorrow, and one is still pending. And at this point, we are only now becoming aware of potential COVID-related health issues that might impact the EPSLA. We're only aware of 2 potential ones, but it could be. And that makes sense. When we started dealing with this with staff and informing staff of the potential, EPSLA, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, as it related to your own health, really was a non-issue 2 and 3 weeks ago for a staff member, because there was no work for them. They weren't at school yet, so it wasn't impacting work. There was no reason to contact us. But now, as we grow closer to the working days of school, including those opening 6 PD days, if there is a health issue, they're starting to reach out.
So Jack, this is Steve Kirsch. When you use the term staff, is this just certified staff, or does this scenario apply to to everybody, all employees?
Applies to all employees.
Okay. Thank you.
It's not just teachers, Steve. It's
right.
It's across the board.
Everybody.
Okay. I sort of assume that, but since a lot of the focus is on in classroom and that kind of stuff, there's other, obviously there's other people, from secretaries to nurses to et cetera. Thank you both. Thank you both.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
thank
John,
you,
you want to
Joe,
pipe
for
in
that.
a little on this too next?
Sure. Yeah, John Ostraszewski, Vice Chair. So a couple things, I guess. I mean, that sounds great to track this individually on both sides. We should probably have one account that sums everything up, and then we can track any kind of reimbursements that we get on both sides of the house to make sure at the end of the day we know where the shortfall is, if it's on the town side or on the Board of Ed side, and so we know how much we need to address in total. But I think it's an excellent way to track everything. It's great transparency, for the public, so that they can see exactly how much is getting spent to protect the kids in school and to protect town employees and the public. So yeah, I'm all in favor of that.
Okay, Rebecca, I think.
Yeah, I'm in support of it. I think anything to organize the financials and the reporting makes it easier for the rest of us to review it. So all for it.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any more questions on the plan for how we'll track this, do this? We've got the Board of Ed here. So.
Yeah, we talked about the dollars so far for the Board of Ed. Ron, do you have, some expenses for the town side, or Ken?
Ron or Heidi might have more precise dollars, but I think, we're probably on the town side, probably in the $60,000 ballpark, which is, a little bit higher than we were last time we reported it, because some things are accruing. Do you agree, Heidi?
Yes.
Now,
I show about 63,000 right now.
Yeah. So now that said, I know that through a tremendous amount of work by Heidi and by Captain Keith White, they've put in the first FEMA reimbursement package. So those things are ongoing. We do know that we still have the coronavirus relief fund from the state that will come in after that. We have some other FEMA grants that are pending. There's a registrar of voters grant. There's a town clerk grant. So there's a lot of other moving parts, but I agree, wholeheartedly with the approach here on, as I think I said from the very beginning, we had from an accounting perspective, wanted this all in one place so that we knew what the expenses were, regardless of department, and we knew where the offsetting grants may come into place. So I think this just really formalizes it and, does it on an enterprise level, I think is a phenomenal approach. I do know that we are certainly, from an exposure perspective, as we go on I know that there are cases of ongoing expenses. We've had, there's been a couple cases where there's been travel and then a state gets added to the list while they're traveling, and now it's created a backfill requirement. So for example, in our police department, so there's costs there. I know that we are anticipating at some point possibly needing to have costs for increased health department activity related to contact tracing, should there not be enough resources through other means. And we did get word today that another grant was coming out from the state health department. So we just got that, and our health director and I don't think I had a chance to send that to Heidi and Ron yet. We need to dig in terms of what that grant would cover and see how much that would offset. But again, a lot of moving parts, but we are certainly tracking it in one place, and
good.
I think good idea.
All right, sounds like we have a consensus, Ron. Awesome. All right. Anything on the year-to-date budget reports, July 31st? Heidi, you want to talk anything about where we're at with closing out, or the process going forward?
To be honest with you, I haven't really spent a lot of time right now because I've been working a great deal with FEMA. They keep changing the guidelines, so every time I go to report, it has to be adjusted. And
not surprised.
Spending a majority of my time on that for now, but I'm hoping to get to it, starting on it this weekend, closing
Great.
everything out.
Okay. All right. Deb, you want to give us a tax collector's report?
Okay. I sent in your packet, there was 2 reports, one as of July 31st. And the second one was as August 18th when the packets went out. As you see, we're trending very nicely. All the escrow companies did pay on time. I'm having a couple lease cars that haven't paid yet, but overall, I think people have paid. Haven't heard anything except from maybe 10 businesses that, are taking advantage of the reduced interest rate.
Okay.
I don't see any problems. I hate to say this, but I think the problem isn't going to be this year. I think it's going to be next year.
You might be right. Absolutely. I think the other thing is obviously, there's a lot of chatter up at the state level of, finance concerns up there. And I think we've all been down this road before, and we can see where this might be heading. I know the governor was looking for departments to give him, 10% give backs and a lot of areas. So I anticipate it won't be too long before they start thinking that, we're too wealthy and might not need all the money. So I think we're going to have to keep an eye on the state level, but I think it's positive so far, and certainly will be good through the end of the year, and then we'll see where this all goes from there.
Any other questions?
So, Steve Kirsch, Deb, when you say next year, you're talking. Yes, Deb, Steve Kirsch. When you say next year, you're talking about the payments that would be due in January, as to whether those might be a problem.
What my biggest concern is, what I am seeing is because the governor pushed off a lot of the registrations for motor vehicles and everything. I have a feeling we're going to see a huge drop in our motor vehicle on the grand list next year because people don't have to register prior to October 1st. So I don't think people are going to register, and we're going to have a lot of not unregistered cars, but cars that are not going to make the grand list for next year for motor vehicle. And another thing that is pushing up my numbers, which I'm not complaining, is a lot of people are selling their homes, so taxes have to be current. So as you can see, there's a lot of for sales and everything else, signs going up, and taxes have to be current. So that is a big driver for the real estate too. And of course, everyone's getting the financial help from the federal government, supplemental checks and everything else. And I have a feeling that next year that help is not going to be there, and people might be draining their savings accounts now and everything else. And I think the impact we're going to see is next July.
Okay, one other question. I looked at the numbers. How does this year's numbers, either the end of July or this mid-August number, compare to the same period in 2019 from a percentage point basis? Is this sort of the same? I think you said before that 85% are paid through escrow, and then so that's 15% of people that are paying directly. Did you get the same kind of payments from that group?
I had the July 31st report on where we stand. That the last column is July. So if you look at it to budget to collectibles last year, we were at 46%, and this year we're at 47%. So compared to last year, real estate is up. Motor vehicle, personal property from this year to last year is up, and motor vehicle, everything was up from last year. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people were paying their motor vehicles in full, and for January too, because they didn't know what the situation was going to be, what was going to be open in January. So a lot of people seeing they had the money now, paid their motor vehicles in full versus wait until January.
Okay, thank you. I guess I didn't pick that comparison up. Thank you much.
All right.
Okay.
Treasurer?
You got me, Mr. Chairman?
I got you, Pat. How are you?
Good. So you all got a report in your packet. Simply put, with what the Fed has done to lower the interest rate, you're not going to make much money at all. To make goal, you need to make 8% of the year's goal every month. We made 4%, which is why I said I think you're going to come in at about 50% of your $200,000 anticipated income for the year. That's pretty much it. If the board decides liquidity is something you can give up some of your money on, you could maybe go looking in the markets for something that'll provide better interest rates. But other than that, it is what it is, as they say. Any questions?
Very concise report.
Stay well,
I felt like that was one of my reports from 8 years ago.
Well,
it did have a familiar ring to it.
If you look back at some of the narratives I've provided going back into like March, I'm a little scared at the fact that I talked about the stiff rate being down to 0.10. I think in 2008 it took all the way to 2011 to get to 0.10. We've done it in 4 months. But there's no other opportunities for us. I mean, we don't have the ability to buy stocks. We don't have the ability to do a lot of things. So, with the money you have on hand, I guess the good news is, it's not going to cost you anything to spend it on all these COVID costs that you have.
Right. It's true. All right. Appreciate that. Ron, is there anything else on the Board of Ed financials you want to bring to our attention?
Yeah, so included in your packet was a year-to-date budget report, current year-to-date budget report as of June 30th. There's right now there are only 3 open POs. It's showing a net surplus of $372,000. The pension payment was made.
Excellent.
So the only caveat there is there's one which we're kind of working through. There's one cafeteria fund issue we're kind of working through right now, which still relates to last year. So really nothing to report on that yet, but keep you posted. That's a pretty good number at this point.
Okay.
So this is
So
Steve
my
Kirsch.
assumption is we will want to roll that into a fund of some sort to hopefully address some of these other issues. I don't know what the thought process is on the board side, but I would assume that's what they'll be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, as Superintendent Cobza mentioned earlier, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, there's more unknowns than knowns at this point, certainly
Right.
Financially with regard to the school year.
But I think you're right.
This is Steve Kirsch. So at the Board of Ed meeting, yes, they talked about getting together with us and rolling it over and putting it in a fund. And given the fact that we're separating out COVID, my question to the superintendent is there's still a lot of things that were not funded in the original budget from that was planned or wanted for this year. I'm not exactly sure where all that cut list ended up. I don't have it in front of me, but are any of those items things that you might be coming forward for and asking us to put some of this 372,000-ish money toward?
It's a great question. It's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about it yet because I think like Mike had said, I have a feeling a lot of this is going to get sucked up by our COVID costs. I'm thinking our COVID costs may exceed that, but it'd be a good conversation to have with the Board of Education too.
Well, I understand that COVID and there's a lot of unknowns out there, but I think there were a lot of things on that list that were legitimate needs. And, I sort of look at COVID as, yes, it's an expense and we're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. There's going to be offsets from the state and from the federal government. But there might be things on that list that would be educationally sound that you wouldn't want to put off. If you were going to buy something, you'd buy it, at the beginning of school or whatever. And so I personally would be willing to entertain a request from the Board of Education to look at specific items on that cut list for applying some of this 372,000. But that's certainly up to the Board of Education yourself if you want to bring that forward.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the other concern is one of the reasons we have this surplus is because of COVID. A lot of the things we weren't running the schools. So, I mean, I think, to my opinion, I think it's a little early to start saying, oh, let's go spend it on this, that, and the other thing, because I don't know what school's going to look like in 3 months, to be honest with you. And I don't think anybody in the planet knows that. We're all praying and hoping that kids can return and be full-time and be normal and, have some semblance. But I think until we get some guidance and some track record, at least a few weeks in place to see how this is going to, we have great plans, and I commend the Board of Ed and Superintendent for doing a great job. And obviously it has not been easy. But I think we're really going to see how the plan on paper works in practical things and how much effect on personnel and buildings this really has. I think we're in such a different world than we were, 6 months ago when we were looking at budgets. That, to me, I think we've got to kind of keep an eye on it and see where it goes and figure it out. But we're certainly open to listen to anything. But I think we just don't, at this point, I don't feel like we have enough to make any decisions at this point. All right. Anybody have anything else on the Board of Ed side?
Yeah, Rebecca O'Donnell, Board of Finance. I had a question on transportation costs with going back to school. I don't know how that contract is staged, but are we all set, or is there going to be any kind of increase if there's additional buses or bus routes, or how is that working out?
Yeah, Rebecca, good question. I don't anticipate any increases by any means, because as of right now, we are not looking to have any extra buses. In fact, I think a lot of parents are doing us a pretty good service in terms of getting their kids to and from school. We did a survey and found that roughly half of the parents would agree to drive their kids to school during the year. Now they can change their mind whenever they want, but we with our schools, at least to start the year at half occupancy, and then half of those folks being driven in by their parents, our buses should be fine. We should be able to run the regular routes that we run. And Wednesdays are going to be it's going to be a full remote learning day for all students. So I think one of the things that Ron and I, one of the things we have on our list is to go back to the bus company and talk about that. We have to look at the contract though and see. We negotiated with them in the spring when this all happened, and we might have to have a little conversation about an adjustment, but I can't guarantee anything now.
No, but we have to have the conversation. Exactly.
All right, thank you. I just know that was a big expense, which we saw some savings from because we weren't in session. So I just wanted to kind of keep that on our radar as well.
Appreciate that. Okay.
I appreciate.
You got anything else?
I'm all set, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Someone want to make a motion?
Steve Kirsch, motion to adjourn.
There you go, Steve. Appreciate
Somebody
it.
else can do it.
Nobody else.
I was holding out
We're
for
all
you.
waiting for you. Tradition now.
I'll second.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Joe, thanks for everything. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ron.
Everybody,
Take care.
stay safe.